Welcome to part 2 of Cardano Starter Kit number 3. I'm here in GitHub at Cardano Starter Kit number 3, and I'm really excited to hop in my time machine right now and go back and party like it's 1999 with you. The purpose of this video is just to provide a foundation for anybody who's never looked behind the scenes at a web page before. I want to show you the basic technology upon which web development is built so that you have this background knowledge when we use more modern technology at the end of this starter kit to build a very simple app. We're going to have some fun. I'm actually really excited just to go back and do this. And again, if you've never done this before, I really hope that what I show you here demystifies web development a little bit, and that you can take some of the extensions to launch your own learning journey. Now, you need to be able to know how to use GitHub. And so if you've never done that before, I provide an overview here in Starter Kit number 1 of how to create an account and what basic interaction with GitHub looks like. I have a link to the video you're watching now, and finally a link to a separate repository for just this part 2 of the starter kit. I called it 3A just so I could keep track of how many different, sub-repositories there are here. There's also something special about this repository. It's a template, okay? So I didn't show you this previously in the other videos about GitHub. But when the owner has set up a template, you should just see a nice big green button right here that makes it easy to copy and use this repository. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm actually logged in under my personal account. So when I create a copy, I can give it the same name and it'll live in my account instead of the Gimbalabs one. I am going to leave this public because we're going to publish this page in just a minute. And you don't have to worry about copying any branches because there aren't any. So let's create this. It takes a few moments. And when it's done, I'm going to have my own copy of this GitHub repository in my account just to play around with and do whatever I want. If you did this right, you should see your account name right here, and you're ready to go. Here's a checklist of what we're going to do. We're going to create a very simple web page. We're going to publish it, and just so you can see what this looks like. GitHub Pages is a great tool for testing out ideas and putting them out in the open for feedback, or if you just want to play around with an idea. Okay, so all of you entrepreneurs who are trying to build something, this is a really nice way to mess around and just throw your ideas out there to see what works. We are going to see that there's some inefficiencies to using GitHub Pages to review our changes. So I'm going to show you how to edit your code in CodePen and see what those changes did right away. We're going to talk a little bit about JavaScript and a little bit about CSS and importing a new font to our page, again, just to expose you to these ideas. All right, so let's do it. Up at the top of this file, you'll see a finished solution for what I'm about to show you, but don't click in there. Just follow along with this video. Really try to build this yourself so you can understand what we're doing as we move along. I'm going to open up the index, and here I see a very basic HTML file. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Now you see that HT right there. It's just like hypertext in HTTP, except that instead of using the transfer protocol, now we're using the markup language that is sent along that protocol to display pages on any computer screen in the world. An HTML file consists of tags, and this right here is a tag, okay? So you've got the name of the tag in between these, I still call them greater than and less than signs. Sorry. So we've got a tag. We've got an HTML tag here that opens up the HTML for the page, and a closing one here. Okay, you see how the closing one has the slash. We have a head opening and closing tag, and the body starts here and ends here. In the head, we have a title for the page. In the body, we have a heading, and that's barely a paragraph, but that's what the P stands for. I can edit this page in GitHub by clicking the pencil icon, and let's just customize this a tiny bit. So I'll add my initials here so they appear in the title. And what we mean by title is the text that appears up here on the tab, and you'll see this in just a minute. Okay, so that says by JD. And then I won't touch the heading here, but I do want to complete this paragraph. Again, we're time traveling back to 1999, where web pages, well, I guess you could still write a web page like this. But again, we're going to use a bunch of technology that was available to web developers 2 decades ago, just so we can better appreciate what we're looking at now. Cool? Cool. Now, if you remember, when you're done editing a file, you can commit it. And the thing is, whoops, I know what happened. Okay. The thing is, now that this is my own repository, I don't have to ask for permission to make these changes to anybody else. I can actually just commit these changes directly to my main branch. And I'm not even going to write a note here because I'm just messing around. This is all for myself. You know, same thing with your file. You're not responsible to anybody, right? So you don't need to communicate yet. All we're doing is we're playing with HTML. So those changes are made. I can go back home. I can see that a change happened 15 seconds ago. But of course, the README file is not changed because all we did was we changed the index. So good. Now we have a simple static web page, right? It's static because it doesn't do anything. It's just some text on the page. But we've only actually looked at the HTML. We haven't actually seen what would show up in somebody's web browser. Now there's a few ways to do that. And this has gotten a lot easier in the last couple of decades, all right? So we have a feature here on GitHub called Pages that actually makes it really easy if you've created an index.html file to view that file in a web browser and to share it with the world. So if you're a builder or an entrepreneur who has some ideas, actually Pages is a really great tool for just putting your ideas out there quickly so you can share them with the world, find out people's opinions about what you're building. It's a really great tool. So I'll let you read more about that via this link. I just want to show you how to set it up. So let's do that. Up at the top of the page, there's a link to settings. So again, I'm still in the same repository. I'm going to go to the settings for this repository. And I'm going to scroll down the page until I find GitHub Pages. Now, all I have to do here is I have to set the source for these pages to be served from. I'm going to choose the main branch because there's actually no other ones to choose. We've kept this very simple. And then here you see how it says folder/root. Root just means the default, right? So we haven't built any additional files here. And the index folder, the index.html file is right there in the main directory of our repository, right? So it's going to be served directly from here. Now the name index.html is really special because it's the default name of an HTML file that the HTTP protocol looks for. All right, so notice we don't have /index.html right here. And also it's not published yet. This is the one thing about Pages. There we go. Sometimes it takes a few moments to publish. So I'm going to show you a shortcut for editing HTML in just a minute. But if I go here Now I can see this really simple file. And by the way, if I typed index.html here, notice it's the very same thing, right? It doesn't matter if you write that or not, because this is the name of the file that the protocol looks for. So unless you tell it a different page to go to, that's where HTTP is going to go. Here we are. I've got the title up here. Remember, in the heading, I had a title tag. Then we had the H1 tag, which is the header that looks like this, and the paragraph tag where we had just a little bit of text. Wow, this page is boring, but it is live, and I could share this link with the entire world to show them my work. Let's make it a little bit fancier. Now I mentioned, you see I had to click the back arrow a few times because I was just playing around with the URL. But here we go. Let's go back. All right, so again, I've got my HTML file. That file is now live in GitHub Pages. And I could just go back into it and I could start editing it. But then actually every time I edit it and make changes, I then have to commit those changes, and then I have to wait a few moments for them to appear in GitHub Pages, which is just a really inefficient way to work. You could do it, but you would waste a lot of time doing so. So instead of doing that, I'm going to use a tool called CodePen. I'm going to open this in a new tab. CodePen is a free tool. You can sign up and make an account, but actually to play around with it, you don't even have to make an account. You can just click the Start Coding button, and then we have 3 windows here, HTML, CSS, and JS for JavaScript. And we can build something and just see it re-render in real time. So let's go back to this file. Let's just copy this code. Just the code, copy it, paste it here in HTML. And there's our web page. And watch this. When I make changes now, like an exclamation point, they show up on the page within a moment or two. And I don't have to go back and forth committing changes and then reviewing what that looks like, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so if you want to work quickly, CodePen is a great tool. Notice CSS and JS over here. Those are actually the next things we're about to cover. We're going to use a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of CSS to make this page just a tiny bit more interesting. All right, and actually to make this really simple, we're not even going to separate the CSS and JavaScript files. Keep in mind that these files can be separate, and you're going to see this later on in the starter kit. I don't remember how to close these. There we go. Okay. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to work with this HTML file. I'm going to add some things to the code here, and I'm going to make this page just a little prettier and a little bit more interactive. And I should be more precise. I just used the word code. And if I'm being really precise with my language, we're actually not writing code yet. We are writing ML. We're writing markup language. Okay? That's what HTML is. But it's actually possible to incorporate some code into an HTML file. And the most popular way to do that is with a language called JavaScript. Okay, so you see here at CodePen, HTML, CSS is for styling, JS is for JavaScript, which is really the programming language of the front end of pretty much all web pages on the internet. There are other languages used on the front end and the back end, but truly the vast majority of what you'll see is written in JavaScript, okay? That's another reason why it's so exciting that when you go to the Marlowe playground, you can also play with Marlowe in JavaScript, okay? So I want to give you just an initial context right here for what it looks like to add a little bit of JavaScript to a page. There's 2 things you have to do, First of all, actually, whoops, this needs to be inside of the body tags. I'm actually going to add a set of script tags right here. Okay, script. And this just tells the markup language that, whoops, I got to close that tag. Sorry. This just tells the HTML file, right, the markup language, that inside of these tags, we're going to have a little bit of code. I also want somewhere to put the code I'm about to write. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the year 1999, and I'm going to replace it with a set of span tags, open and close. And then I'm going to give this span an ID called my year. The most important thing is that we can give any HTML tag more information inside of the tag. In this case, we're going to say, okay, this span has an identifier of my year. So if we had other spans on the page, right, maybe they wouldn't have the same ID, right? Just this one. This span is called my year. I could add an ID like this to an H1 tag. I could add an ID like this to a paragraph tag. The only reason I'm using span right here is because I want to add a phrase, or, in this case, a year, to a sentence that's already inside of some paragraph tags, all right? But the key part is not the particulars of the tag I'm using. It's just that I'm using an ID called my year. And now I have an identifier for where I'm going to send the results of the JavaScript I'm about to write in between these script tags. Now I'm about to show you what some JavaScript looks like. I'm not going to teach you all of JavaScript right now. All right, so please keep that in mind. I am going to point you at some follow-up resources if you'd really like to start your learning journey. All right, this starter kit is all about exposure. Now that you're kind of seeing what these pieces are, you can choose to learn more about them. All right, so let me show you a few things. I can create a variable inside of this JavaScript called year. I could call the variable whatever I want, and then I can set it to some information. I'm going to say the year is 1999. Use a semicolon at the end of this line because now I'm writing in JavaScript. And then I'm going to write a line of code right here that, if you've never done this before, is going to have a few unknown things in it. But let's see if we can break down just a little bit of what's happening. We're going to grab the current document that we're on. We're going to look for an HTML element. How are we going to identify that element? By ID. And what ID are we looking for? We're looking for the ID my year, right? So this right here has to match this right here. Then we can use this JavaScript property called inner.html. And finally, we can set all of that equal to the year. So now this, we're calling on the variable we set here. So this word has to match this word if we want the year 1999 to be fed into here and to be rendered as my year. If I change this number to 2000, okay, or 2020, what is partying like in 2020, everybody? I'm not even sure. All right, let's see. So let's go back. Let's actually, you know what? This is fun. I can actually use arithmetic here, right? I could write 1,000 plus 1,000 if I wanted to. I could use some multiplication if I wanted to. Basically, any arithmetic I want. Even more important than that is that anywhere you can do arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and so on, you can also perform more complicated operations. So all I'm showing you is that, look, in between these script tags, you could write a little program called a script. And the results of that program, you can pass those to the HTML. But if you want to do something more advanced, right, which pretty much all web apps do all sorts of complicated things. Well, they're built on logic like this that does all sorts of really interesting things and makes information appear on the page, right? So as we continue through this starter kit, we're going to keep looking at more and more advanced ways to make information appear on a web page. All right, so let's leave the year as 1999, and let's try to make this page look just a little more interesting. There's a few ways to do this. Remember these script tags here. There's other sorts of tags that you can use in an HTML file to add additional languages. There's another language called CSS. All right, so let me pause for just a second. I'm going to style. Okay, so just like I was able to write those script tags a moment ago, I can also use style tags. These go in the head of the HTML file and not the body. And you know what? I should move this whole thing over. Good, because it's inside these body tags. Inside these style tags, just like I can write JavaScript inside of script tags, I can write CSS inside of these style tags. Again, remember, in real web development, you're going to keep separate files for your CSS and JavaScript, and then you're going to use references inside the HTML to make those files talk to each other. But don't worry about that yet. I'm going to show you a little tiny bit of that in just a minute. Let's just see what it means to style this page a little bit. All right. So the first thing you have to do, similar to the way we used an ID to tell this code where to render, I can use tags and IDs to tell the style sheet what to style. For example, let's see. Okay, Party Like It's 1999. That's a song by Prince. So let's keep it going. Whoops, I'm writing tags here. I'm trying to talk and do stuff at the same time. Sorry, and it's giving me errors. All right, I'm going to write H1 right there for heading 1. I'm going to use some curly brackets. And inside those curly brackets, I think of purple when I think of Prince. Purple Rain. So let's just change the color. Isn't that a lyric in 1999? Something about the purple sky. Okay. Anyway, look. When I change the color to purple on what? On H1, then the H1 turns purple. Cool. And check it out. If I put a comma right here and a P as well, guess what? The paragraph also turns purple. But what if I didn't want to color the whole paragraph? I just wanted to color the year. In that case, I can type the hashtag, the pound sign, my year. Sorry, I'm always bad with naming things. Let's see. Look at this. Okay, so I can use tags or IDs to really pinpoint what I want to style on the page. How cool is that? All right. So now my H1 and the year are colored in purple as an homage to Prince. Cool. Actually, pausing again, I shouldn't be using the term homage to Prince because look at this font right here. It's the most boring font in the world, and that guy had a lot of style. So let's try to make this look just a little bit better. And actually, to do this now, we're going to fast forward to the year 2010 when Google released Google Fonts. Okay. And one of the main stories in web development over the last 20 years has been how it's become modular. You're able to grab different pieces from different places to never have to really start from scratch. Okay, there's such a wealth of work that's been done and documentation and information about it, that when you're doing modern day web development, you're never really just building something from a blank page. You're always starting from things that other people have built. And at the end of this starter kit, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to fast forward quite a bit. In order to get us ready for that, let's look at this tool called Google Fonts. Like I said, this was first released in the year 2010. And what you can see when you scroll this page is that there's all these different fonts. And all of these are freely available to be used on any web page that you're building. Let's see if we can find a snazzy one. Let's see. Oh, there we go. That looks good. I don't know if this is really princey, but it looks kind of, it just looks cool to me. And I like the bold even better because we're talking about headings, right? So what you can do on Google Fonts, and there's a lot more documentation. You can read about this, read the articles. If you like this tool, learn how to use it. I'm just showing you the basics of how it works, okay? But let's say I want to use this font on my page. I can select it. This generates some information that I can add to my page. So it says, to embed a font, copy the code into the head of your HTML. All right, I know how to do that. So I'm going to select that, copy it, back to CodePen. It said add this to the head. So in between the header tags, maybe I'll put this right under the title and paste it there. Okay. So there's these two link tags with some information inside. This one, actually both of them, look, they have these web addresses on them. So this is actually calling on a different address to grab some information from elsewhere. Then how do I use it? It says CSS rules. I can take this and I can copy it into these curly brackets for my H1 and my year. So the H1 tag and my year element ID. Let's do that. And then let's see, did it work? Yeah, check it out. All right, that font already looks way better, way less boring. Notice, once again, you can choose between only sending the style to the span, right, which has the my year ID on it. Or if you wanted to do the entire paragraph, no need for the pound sign, just put a P there and we get the whole thing. All right. So we just used the style sheet to say, hey, use this font now. Where does that font come from? Well, we imported it here in the head of our file from Google Fonts. Notice as well, we're accessing a Google API. So we're going to talk more about APIs later in this starter kit, but this is your initial exposure to what it looks like to access information or data or style from some other tool elsewhere on the internet. Finally, there's one more thing I want to do. I want to add just a little bit of interactivity to this page, just so you can get an initial idea of, how JavaScript is used to make web apps into things you can actually interact with, right? This is a static page. There's just some text. It doesn't do anything. We're going to use JavaScript to make a little drop down right here. All right. And so what I did is back to the README. It says use JavaScript to introduce logic and interactivity. If you click this interactivity link, it takes you to the W3 Schools website, which is another great place to start learning. And it gives us this example right here of a panel that slides up and down. Okay. Now, Developers, I just mentioned, right, that a lot of web development these days is just built by cobbling pieces together that are already built, right? Developers rarely start from scratch, right? If you work smart, you're always building on something. So let's just shamelessly do some cutting and pasting from this example right here so we can incorporate it into the web page that we're building. All right, let's look at this. We have HTML tags. Do you recognize those now? I see a body. That's actually not much, right? The body of this page just has 2 div tags in it, each of them with a different ID and each of them with different text inside. There's one called flip that I can see when I come to this page. And when I click it, there's one called panel that slides down and it says hello world. Each of those are styled. Look, there's the style tags, right? Styled, we have panel and flip are styled in a certain way. And then panel is styled differently with more padding, and display is set to none. That's why it doesn't show up when you first load the page. Then finally, there's a couple of more scripts up here. So remember how we wrote some JavaScript at the end of our page here? You can also place scripts in the head of your file to pull in additional functionality. Now, once again, we are calling on a Google API right here. And this time we're calling on a library called jQuery. jQuery is a library of pre-built interactive functions that are all written in JavaScript and free for people to use. We're going to use one called slide toggle. So we are importing this library so we can use a function called slide toggle to introduce some interactivity to our page. Again, let's just cut and paste some things. So let's cut these scripts. Copy, I should say. Let's copy those underneath these links that we imported. We're bringing in some scripts. And I can I can highlight a bunch of text and just tab that over like that. Then what else do we have to grab? We need some additional styling. So actually, yeah, both of these. Let's grab both of those. We're going to copy those, and underneath the H1 and the P, add those in between our style tags. We can go ahead and fix the tabbing just to make it look better. We can tab all of this over. All right, good. That takes care of the style. And now we need to grab these divs, and we want to place those inside of the body of our HTML, after the paragraph, under the script. And check it out. Just like that, it works. Okay. So all we did is we cut and pasted. We had to pay attention to where we took each of these things from so they could end up in the right spots of the page we're building. But now we have a little bit of, it's not pretty, but it's some interactive functionality. Let's style it just a little bit more. What if we make that border a little thicker? Okay. And these are called hexadecimal colors. You can learn about colors if you never have, but basically the first 2 numbers tell you the amount of red. The second 2 numbers tell you the amount of green, and the last 2 numbers tell you the amount of purple. So we could make this a shade of purple by adding a little bit of red, 0 green, and some blue. Let's see, how does that work? Okay, now we got a kind of a purple border there. Let's also make the background color purple. We'll just switch those 9s and 4s. So more red, no green, and some blue. Also makes things kind of a purple color. All right. And then maybe we want the font color to be white so it's easier to read there. How's that? Cool. Good enough, right? And then maybe you also want to add this font family to these features, right? So I could grab this line right here, and I could add that here. And then there we go. Now we're using our font. Finally, let's just customize the text a little bit so it looks like ours. Let's quote the 1999 song. I'm feeling nostalgic. If you didn't come to party. This is kind of like a knock-knock joke, bringing us down to protocols. Aren't all pop songs protocols too? Don't bother knocking on my door. Don't bother knocking on my door. Nice. All right, that's even more fun. Cool. All right, so what we've done, we just grabbed and then customized the slide toggle jQuery object, and we customized the styling a little bit. We changed the words inside of it, and now we have this sweet website. Okay, we built this in CodePen, but really I want to bring this back to GitHub so I can publish it. So now I'm going to once again copy all of this text, copy it here from CodePen, go back to GitHub, navigate back to the home page of the repo, open up the index file. Ooh, wow, that feels like a long time ago that it looked like that. I've learned so much since then. I'm just going to select everything, delete it, and then paste what I was just doing in CodePen. Let's commit those changes. Let's go back and over to the settings. Now remember, I just made some changes so you can see it's waiting to be published. Okay, so it takes a few minutes. Again, this is why we were using CodePen in the first place, is because you can see how inefficient it is to make changes, commit them, and then wait for this to turn green. But sure enough, there it is. Let's go check it out. Welcome to Cardano Starter Kit number 003, where we party like it's 2010 or 1999 or whatever number I want to put there. If you didn't come to party, don't bother knocking on my door. All right, I think we did it. Cool. So now look what I have. I have a public web address that I could send to my friends and my family to show them all of this great work I did. I have it saved in a GitHub repository where I can come back and edit it anytime. There it is. Okay. And notice in the README, I provide you with a couple of more extensions here. Okay. So if this video got you thinking and you want to keep learning, that's my number one goal. That's if these starter kits are successful, all they do is they launch you farther along on your own learning journey. And so here's some things that you might want to do. First of all, if you just want to learn more about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, do go check out Free Code Camp. Like it says, it's free. It's got a long curriculum with, thousands of hours of content. And if you look at the top course right here, Responsive Web Design Certification, it starts with HTML. It moves to CSS. You learn a lot about styling pages and providing accessibility. And then you move on to JavaScript after that. Okay? So we only touched the very basics of all of this today, but hopefully I gave you enough context to be able to make sense of what you're beginning to see and hear. As additional extensions, if you don't want to do all of the work on Free Code Camp, see if you can just figure out how to add a picture of Prince or put some links on your page. And so all I did here is I linked to specific Free Code Camp lessons that'll walk you through how to do the things I'm suggesting as these extensions. Or if you'd rather look elsewhere, maybe you want to tackle the challenge of embedding a video from YouTube onto your page. Here's the YouTube documentation for how to do that. Notice that no matter what, as a developer, a big part of the job is just reading the documents, reading what's out there. If you've ever wondered why developers have 3 different screens set up, part of the reason is that they've got one screen for their code, like we have right here, a separate screen for rendering their work so they can see what it's doing, right? And maybe yet another screen for reviewing documentation, reading instructions, and making sure you understand how to incorporate whatever tools have been built into the new things you're building. Okay, so we've got where we build, we've got what we see when we build, and information on how we build. All right, I hope this was helpful. If you have questions about the extensions, just let me know. If there's things you would change about this video or things you liked about it, it always helps me to hear that so I know what to do more of. And hope to see you out there. All right, in the next part of this starter kit, we're going to go a little bit deeper into development. We're going to fast forward to right now, to the year 2020, and take a look at, first of all, what it takes to get ready to build an app in the year 2020. And some very popular tools for doing that. And you're going to see, of course, our old friends HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as we continue to work. All right, thanks for watching this, everybody. See you soon.